Thank you so much. That was beautiful. So today we begin a series on this book, The Eye of the Storm, by the Reverend Dr. Gary Simmons. And this book is actually the foundation of the work that we are doing all this year here at Unity of Birmingham. We have been calling this the year of living with nothing and no one against you. And we've already begun doing a series of workshops on something called the Q effect, which was created by Gary Simmons and a couple of his partners in work and research. The Q effect is kind of subtitled, The Art and Practice of Living with Nothing and No One Against You. But those workshops, and we've already had one that we invited the leadership of the church to, and there are going to be two more that Reverend Christine is going to offer this year, one in July and one, I believe, in October or November. And I cannot encourage you all enough to take advantage of that work. And in the meantime, we're going to take a look at the foundational work that it sprang from. So for the next 7 weeks on Sunday morning and on Wednesday evening, we are going to be talking about what it is like to live with nothing and no one against you. There are other disciplines that we practice in Unity. There are other teachings that we talk about. There are many great books from many great masters. But I will tell you that there is probably nothing that will affect you at depth and free you to do that work that your soul came here to do, that service and that growth, like the work that this book opens us to, that the art and practice of living with nothing and no one against us brings us to. When we are able to awaken, to look into our shadow, to bring light to those places, to learn to see the world in a new way, in a myriad of new ways, we truly can do that service work that our soul came here to do. We truly can be who we've been called here to be. So this title, The Eye of the Storm, is very descriptive. How many of you have actually experienced a hurricane? That's okay, that's a pretty good number. I lived for a large chunk of my adult life in Florida, and I got to experience several of them. I remember in 2004, we got hit by 4 major hurricanes in 1 year. My guard unit got to respond to and clean up after pretty much all of them. But it was very surreal. 3 of those 4 major hurricanes actually passed over my house. We lost portions of the roof. But it is fascinating how the world can be violent and destructive. The wind is roaring, the lightning and the rain are coming down, and then an hour or 2 later, everything's quiet. The sun comes out. It's clear, it's calm. The air does not move. And then the other side gets there. When we talk about the eye of the storm, what we refer to is that point of balance in the midst of all the chaos. Because in a hurricane, there is in fact a place in the center where all the forces are in perfect harmony and perfect balance. And that is such a good metaphor for where we can be in consciousness. You know, there can be tremendous forces swirling around us, not only in the physical outside, but at the outer layer of our consciousness, where our awareness and our perception and our belief system all combine to become that perfect storm, the same way that differing weather patterns can come together and cause giant movement in the sky. And so when we talk about getting into the eye of the storm, we talk about finding that calm place, that centered place within. And of the tools that this work calls us to, centering is one of the most important concepts. Very often when we go into meditation, we talk about being centered. And it is not only a practice of the mind, but it can also be a practice of the body. There's a two-way street between our minds and our bodies. Sometimes we call emotions the mind's effects on the body. It's very strange. You know, I can listen to a poem that was written by a guy in a boat and then set to an old English drinking song and be brought to tears almost every time. Why that is, it's hard for me to explain. But when I can't even talk about the Star-Spangled Banner without becoming a little emotional. And centering can have kind of the opposite effect on us. Much as learning biofeedback does when we breathe, when we become aware of how our breath is moving through our body, when we do a quick inventory of our tensions. Am I tense in my forehead or around my eyes? What's my neck up to? That one's a really good indicator for me. And so on. Then when we actively ease all these things, we can move into a state of being centered. We can actually change our responses and our reactions based on how our body is affecting our mind. So as this series goes forward, we're going to talk about centering in some more specific ways, but we will certainly look at a lot of different things from that center point, that place of balance, that eye of the storm. So then we have to kind of ask ourselves, well, what is it that takes us away from that? If we know that that's within us, if we know that we have a still small voice that guides us, that we have a safe place, that we are Christ, what is it that pulls us out into the wind and the rain and the lightning? For many of us, what that is a perception that we are somehow less than whole. We are missing something. We are not safe. We don't have everything we need. Someone's trying to take our good away from us. We won't be able to get what we need. Life's circumstances are pulling something away. They're preventing us from getting what we want. Life is somehow against us. But if we know in any given moment that we have exactly what we need, we can return to that place of balance, that center, that eye of the storm. When we do that, we can really live with nothing and no one against us. And you know, when I say that, I would imagine that for many people there's a little voice of resistance that comes up. What do you mean, Charles? Nothing and no one is against us. I know I have people against me. My boss is against me. My partner is against me. There are people out there that want to fly airplanes into buildings that are against us, for crying out loud. It seems, and that's the key word, it seems that so much of life is stacked up against us. When we look from a place of lack, when we look from a place of need, and when we don't understand that in every moment we are connected to Spirit and that God is present in everything. Unity's first principle is that there is one presence and one power, God. Now that does not mean that we took Satan just out of the picture and God is somewhere off in a heaven that's far away, sitting by himself. You know, he's got the national championship. He's 1-0, and that's all there is. What it means is that God is in all things. There is one presence everywhere. There is one power everywhere. When we truly understand that we are part of that, we understand that nothing can be against us. Now, do we experience challenges? Do we have things that don't feel so good? Absolutely. You know, in our own bodies, I may start having a problem in my shoulders. And maybe that problem actually began because my hips are a little tweaked out of alignment. Well, I don't have any againstness going on in there. My hips and my shoulder aren't, hollering up and down my spinal cord. Hey, you, straighten yourself out. It's just they are where they are. My hips are a little bit, I'm kind of tweaked here. And everything upstairs of them is trying to figure out how to go. There's no againstness. It's simply responding to what is in that moment. When we as people can respond from a place of knowing that nothing is against us, amazing things can happen. My prayer partner is the minister of the church in El Cajon, California. His name's Brian Grandin. And Brian has told a story several times of a time when many of us would say, well, see, that's proof things are against you. He was actually about to get mugged by a guy with a knife. He was on a dark street at night, and he was approached by a guy holding a knife who obviously had an intent to come after him and maybe to do him harm. Not just to threaten him, but actually harm him. Now, in that moment, most of us would have been struck with a fright or flight response. Like we're either going to mix it up and try to take the knife away from him, or we're just going to run. And Brian was led to instead become calm, to extend all the love he held in his heart to that person. He opened himself. He smiled at that person. He was as gentle and loving as he could be. And he said the change in that guy was immediate and amazing. He dropped his knife. He looked at Brian and he said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. had Brian reacted from a place of againstness, I have a feeling that that would have gone very differently. Now, hear me when I say that we each must feel into every situation, and if you are in genuine danger, you must listen to Spirit's prompting and responding from a knowing that truly nothing and no one is against you will always provide you with a better response, a clearer response, a safer response than reacting swiftly and violently. You see, that piece of us that responds from a place of not seeing the safety in the moment, not understanding that there is more than meets the eye. That's another extremely important factor in being able to stay in that center, and that's our perception. We as human beings have the power to perceive a little of what goes on around us. None of us sees it all. And what's interesting is that our brains actually fill in information whether there are missing pieces. So our perception of the world is colored by the data that's in our database. In the Q Effect workshop, there's a little test. And when it's put up on the screen, at first, we see a rainbow. Then it cuts to a waterfall that's in black and white, but most people's eyes will continue to see the colors of the rainbow superimposed over that waterfall, even though it's only black and white. Sometimes even seeing cannot be trusted to be believing, because our brains place information out there that simply isn't real. Probably the most important thing to remember is that no matter what it appears to be out there, even if it's about to create a loss, even if it's about to cause physical pain, even if it's about to take away everything we think is really dear and important to us, this universe is not against us. God is not against us. By allowing ourselves to understand that, we are free to look at life in a new way. We are free to see beyond the appearances and reach out in consciousness to what is. We are free finally to become a part of all that is, not apart from all that is. We are truly free to live with nothing and no one against us, you know. We are going to be challenged. That is part of this deal. The meditation I did was actually from the foreword in this book. And, you know, is that what happens to us at a soul level? Maybe. But it's certainly very descriptive of what underlies this journey that we take. We are more than these things and anything that happens to them. And truly, one of the biggest lies is that we are our experiences. We are not our experiences. We are beyond our experiences. We experience our experiences. But we have come here to do and be far more than just the sum of our experiences. We have come here with a purpose. We have come here to serve. We have come here to grow. We have come here to be a brighter light in this universe. I love how Gary says that we are challenged to live in the present moment, not our inherently flawed perception of it. We are challenged to live from abundance rather than apparent lack. We are challenged to allow those things which seem to be against us to propel us forward on our soul's journey to oneness. This week, as we begin to understand what it means to live with nothing and no one against us, I invite all of us to be joyful living in the challenge. Thank you.